Good afternoon. My name is Emily Harman. I'm the Director of the Department of Navy's Office of Small Business Programs, and we're here today with the Honorable James Geurts, the Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisition. And we're here at SEER Space Exposition, which we've been here all week, where we're learning about the most current information about that's technology that's relevant to our maritime national security this week. And we've also been discussing lots of things about small business. So, Secretary Geurts, you're new on the job, kind of new. Can you still say you're new?
120 days
120
new.
Days new.
Yep.
So, what's your philosophy about small business, and what kinds of direction are you giving to your acquisition workforce?
Yeah, sure. So I've been in the acquisition world about 30 years, been on the job here about 100, 120, and over those years have found that small business really is an incredible source for innovation, for adaptability, for agility, and for resilience here. So my main goal is how do we leverage small business for the things they're really, really good at, helping the Navy increase our agility, helping us drive costs out of programs and in support of our programs. And then showing us new products, new ideas, new ways of getting after both old problems and new problems we have. And then how do we effectively tap into them, reducing the barriers for entry to make it easier to do business with the Navy. I want the Navy to be known as a service that is the easiest to work with in terms of small business, similar to what I did down at Special Operations Command. Where that command thrived because of our small business approach, as well as the service that really enables us to take small business participation to the next level, far beyond just meeting goals,
right.
But actually knitting them into the fabric of our acquisition ecosystem.
Right. And for those of you out there in Facebook land who've heard me speak, I really don't like to talk a lot about meeting a goal. I mean, a goal is a measure of accountability. It's kind of a measure, are we providing that opportunity for small businesses to participate? But, if you read the National Defense Strategy, our National Defense Strategy doesn't mention small business goals, but it mentions using small startups, non-traditional suppliers as a way to help defend our nation.
Sure. If you haven't had a chance to read the National Defense Strategy, I would highly encourage you to do it. And I would sum it up as how do we continue to compete and win as a nation? And winning teams figure out how to use all the players available, right. Use them for what their strengths are, continue to grow them, and expand. And so as we continue to both be the winning team and want to continue to be the winning team, small business is a big piece of that equation for us.
Right. And we just had a roundtable with some small business liaison officers from some of our large businesses, talking to them about how to provide opportunities to small businesses as subcontractors. And I think one of the big things I took away from there is, we have to think through every acquisition. There's not a boilerplate, 20% small business on everything that we're buying. In some cases, it doesn't make sense. In some cases, it makes sense to really use small business. So we have to be smart buyers in the Department of the Navy.
Yeah, if you think about the Navy, a lot of folks equate shipbuilding with the Navy. And if you looked over the last year, what we've done with small business, I think it's pretty remarkable. Not only how is small business bringing new technology to traditional big business, things like building an aircraft carrier, but also our last two big awards for ships were directly to small businesses. Small businesses
as prime.
As a prime to actually build the ships for our Navy and give us additional industrial base as we look to expand the Navy to at least 355 ships. We can't do that just always doing the way we've always done things.
Right. So there's several different sizes of small businesses. It's based on what we're buying. And so some people have in their mind that a small business is a mom and pop shop, but it could also be a company that can build a ship. So we have to really think through our acquisition strategies and make sure that we're utilizing small businesses and encouraging industry to use them where we think it matters for our mission.
And a couple areas of success where I've had success in the past. If you're a small business, you've got to let us know what your capabilities are. We're only as good as being informed we are. So we've got to make it easy for you to let us know the capabilities you have, so that as we're thinking about developing a capability or putting a program together, we can be fully informed. And the good news here is you've got it great with Emily and the rest of the small business team. You have folks on your side, their whole job is to figure out how to connect with you. So if you're a small business out there in Facebook land, and you're confused how to work with the Navy, you don't understand how to let us know about your talents or capabilities, our small business office, their whole job is to be that one-stop shop for you.
Right.
My job is to make sure as we're putting together acquisition programs and strategies, we take advantage of that and create win-win situations where we can, whether it's small business as a prime, small business as a component provider, small business as a subcontractor, be included. And again, not just hardware. The way we interact with small business programs also depends on the sector we're in.
Right.
And so again, to your point, it's not a one-size-fits-all. One of the things we've done in the Navy is assigned all of our deputy program managers as the small business advocates for you. So in the $60 billion a year of programs we're executing, those deputy program managers are accountable to me to make sure we're taking into account small business and integrating that as a vital element of our combat power.
Right. We just had a training session today with some of our deputy program managers and large companies, and we talked about the importance of, during program management reviews, discussing how small businesses are being utilized on that program. For small businesses out there, when you come and approach the government, one thing to really keep in mind is let us know that you understand us. Do your homework. And I have a lot of companies that will come up to me and say, you know, Emily, I'm a woman-owned small business. We can help you meet your women-owned small business goals. But my question back to them is, well, what do you do? How can you help the Navy or the Marine Corps meet their mission? That's what's important to us.
Right. It's all about output to the sailors and Marines.
Right.
I think small business got a vital element of our national power.
Right.
In that realm. But again, it's only as good as the connection we make. The other thing I would say is, if you're a small business, be truthful and honest about where you are in terms of your capabilities. I see many that undersell their capabilities, and I see some that oversell. And so what we're looking for is that honest dialogue, so we understand what's out there, because if there's capability we can go direct to, I'm incentivized to go directly to small business where that capability exists.
Right. So one of the questions that was just passed to me, thank you, Jennifer, was how would we find a small business officer to share a capability statement? Are there regional offices? So the Department of Navy Office of Small Business Programs has a website. And on that website, we have links to each of our description of each of our 10 buying commands. Within the Department of the Navy, we have 10 geographically dispersed buying commands. So the first step is to figure out who's buying what you're selling. You can use our website as a first stop. And we also have information in there about how to contact the small business officers within those organizations.
And one of the things Ms. Harman and I are always looking at, and again, looking for ideas and your feedback, is how successful is that? Right. Can you find us? And what are some other tools or processes we can use to better inform each other about the capabilities you have to bring to bear for our national defense?
Correct. This is just the first of several planned industry talks. And what we're trying to accomplish with these is to communicate to a wider range of audience and to hear back from a wider range of what are the challenges of doing business with us? How can we break down the barriers? And to communicate with our viewers as to how we are actually breaking down the barriers.
And another good way is, also be talking to some of the larger contractors and potentially subcontract with them. That will help get some of the capabilities known to us, continue to mature your products and systems, so that eventually you may want to compete as a prime contractor. That's another pathway to success we've seen.
Right. So what advice do you have, Secretary Geurts, for small businesses to stay competitive in the defense market?
So if you look at, the kind of 4 things I'm looking for, I'll kind of put it in the larger context, where I'm trying to drive the Navy on behalf of the Secretary of Defense through Secretary Spencer, the Secretary of Navy, is really, one is deliver on our commitments. The second is increase our agility. Third is drive cost out, and then fourth is in a talent workforce. And so I'm looking for capabilities that help us deliver on our commitments and needs, help us remain affordable, and then increase our agility. And so I think that's some of what I'm looking for. I would tell you, if you're going to compete and hopefully be successful, then you've got to be ready to execute.
Right.
And so sometimes we have challenges across all of our acquisition base, but particularly in small business, that you'll compete for a contract, you'll write a great proposal, and then we'll go to execution, and then we'll be challenged in execution. And so I would just, compete to win, and then if you win, compete to keep the job, because the best thing you can do to stay in our acquisition system is sustain performance.
Right.
And that's what we're looking for out of our entire acquisition industrial base.
Right, definitely. So we have a large acquisition workforce within the Department of the Navy. What are your ideas of how we can do a better job at sharing lessons learned, sharing best practices on how we're working with small businesses or with anything that we're trying to do?
Yeah, it's, to put it in scale, we've got, I think, 60,000 acquisition professionals just in the Department of the Navy, 51 or more big acquisition programs. A part of that is assigning it as part of your job. So again, we spoke about deputy program managers. Their job is to be the small business advocate. Right. So one of the challenges I think we've had in the past in the Navy was we relied on a few small business liaison officers to try and work that across a large number of programs, and that doesn't work because it doesn't. That's not sufficient just on its own. The second piece I think is the forums like we have here, sharing lessons learned. Part of where I'm driving the acquisition department is to decentralize execution to allow decision making at the lowest level. With that comes a responsibility that we're sharing lessons learned, right. And just not running free. So we put in the oversight mechanism. Ms. Harman's with me, where we review all the contracts across the entire Department of the Navy once a quarter. Mm-hmm. One of the things we're looking at and measuring is are we doing on our small business performance, what are the feedback we're getting, what opportunities do we have, and where are we not meeting our goal of getting them integrated into
right.
the system.
I think one of the things that Naval is doing a good job of, the Naval Air Systems Command, is they have a council of their deputy program managers, and I think they meet 3 or 4 times a year, and they sit down and share lessons learned. And on Monday, I'm going down to Patuxent River to meet with the PEO UNW, Program Executive Officer for Unmanned Systems and Weapons Systems, to just meet with their deputy program managers. So I think that's starting to happen, is the program managers are sharing their...
In the session right before that, I don't know if you want to describe the session you just had with all of them. Right. I think that was another where we shared lessons learned. Right.
We just had a great session. It was a training session for the Department of Navy's deputy program managers, and we had them in the room, but we also had small business liaison officers from the big companies, and we had small business professionals like me from the Department of the Navy. We had a panel, and we just discussed how can we all better interact to make better opportunities. How can we learn from you and you learn from us? And I think we have a lot of good action items that came out of that, and I think that you'll just continue to see more interest from the Department of the Navy on how we're utilizing small businesses, but to meet cost, schedule, performance.
Right, and your feedback's critical. So if you're in a small business and either want to perform or are performing for the Navy, providing that feedback to us of what incentivizes you to participate right. or bring more to the table. Right. That's of interest.
So what do you say to your government employees about how to communicate with industry? When can you talk to industry?
Yeah, it's I think because of some folklore myth and then some incidents along the way, we've gotten into this thought that to run a fair competition, we can't communicate to industry anytime. Right. And my last almost 12 years at Special Operations Command, and quite frankly my experience before that's exactly the opposite. The worst point we are is when we're not talking to each other. Mm-hmm. Now we've got to respect the boundaries of competitive selection processes, but even through competitive processes we should always be dialoguing. And it's particularly important in the small business arena because it's a very dynamic workplace. Small businesses are bringing up new ideas all the time. They're changing, they're partnering, they're doing all sorts of other things. And if you can picture yourself as a program manager and you're building the next carrier for the United States, you can be busy. And so if we don't have a regular mechanism to communicate, we can get out of touch with both what's going on across the whole business space, but in particular capabilities at different small business areas. And so that communication is absolutely critical. Again, where we are most successful is when we understand the marketplace, and then we structure our acquisition programs to best synchronize with the marketplace.
Right.
And if we're not communicating, then our understanding of the marketplace is dated, and then we are at risk of developing a strategy that doesn't fully use to the best ability the marketplace. Because again, we all have the same goal. Our goals are to provide national security, to put the tools and services in the hands of our sailors and Marines, and to have a healthy, strong industrial base.
Right.
And so those are all shared goals. If we're not communicating regularly, then we're at risk of not meeting those goals.
Right. So I had a question here. I've heard you talk a lot about the need to synchronize the operator, the government, and the industry team. When you say industry, you mean just the large primes?
No, of course not.
Okay.
Of course
you mean
not.
Ensuring the smalls are involved.
Yeah. Again, when you say industry, unfortunately, sometimes when we talk about industrial base, you focus on the big things, shipyards or aircraft manufacturers. Behind every one of those shipyards are thousands and thousands of suppliers, small businesses. Behind any successful acquisition program are thousands of suppliers. In fact, we're doing, I think the Navy this year's done a really good job thinking about the industrial base as an enabler for our national defense. And we are only as strong as our industrial base. And when I say that, that goes down to both big companies and small companies, because it's those smaller companies that drive all the parts that go in all our ships and airplanes and all the computer programs that are going in all our combat systems. And so, yeah, we've got to take a look at the whole ecosystem.
Right. What would you say to a company that's having maybe a little bit of challenge with the new cybersecurity standards?
Yeah, it was a great one. In fact, we just talked about that. One of the things we got to look at that's very important to us is that we preserve our national security, and we don't let those who want to steal things from us have access to be able to steal those. And that isn't just from the big companies. You could, steal designs for every part. So you don't have to steal the big design, you can steal all the pieces. So I think the first thing I would say is cybersecurity is critically important for all of us, including our small businesses. And I would say in the past, we've probably neglected that as an element to focus on. So it's an area we're focusing on. One of the things we're looking at are how do we provide you as a small business tools, whether it's training or access to tools, so that the cost of you getting to the needed level of kind of cyber hygiene isn't prohibitive or too burdensome.
Right.
I know Small Business Administration is doing a lot of work in that area. The Department of Defense is trying to do a lot of work in that area. And so if you're having a challenge in that, or you're not sure what we mean, again, use those small business liaisons. They can link you up with resources that we've got and try and help and ask some questions. So what I wouldn't want you to do is go run off and think you had to do something without understanding that. So, again, use Ms. Harman's team that you can find. What's your website?
It's you just Google. It's easier to Google Department of Navy Office of Small Business Programs.
And so if you have questions there, you have points of contact, and then we can make sure you're linked up to the right person.
Right. That's how I find it a lot of times, just Googling it. I actually have it bookmarked too. But so here's a question that came in. How do we identify the appropriate people or departments that are responsible for identifying the products that the Navy wants to buy?
Yeah, that's a good question. And an area I think we can continue to improve is our ability to let you know what we're interested in, where we have needs, and kind of the programs we've got coming up with those needs. So some of that is on our side to make that much more accessible. You can find it if you know the 25 different sites to go chase around, but we need to make it much easier for you. But again, I would go back to these small business advocates that you can find that are across all of our buying commands. And if you're not sure, just say, hey, I've got this product. I think it would be useful in naval aviation, and maybe start with naval aviation. Right. And then Ms. Harman's network of folks, then we'll talk to each other. So the good news is they're all connected, and And while you may think that was best for an airplane, we may say, hey, that could really be useful on a ship, and then they can move you over to those resources.
Right, and each of our buying commands posts on their website a long-range acquisition forecast, which lists what they plan to buy. It may not be 100% accurate because things change, but it gives you an idea of the kinds of things that they are planning.
The other thing I would look for, and again, this is on us to ensure we make it readily available, is we put out broad agency announcements. So particularly if you've got innovative research or innovative technology areas, that's another great source to say, here are the kinds of technologies we're looking for or needs we're looking to fill, and that gives you all the ways to respond to that. And a response it's not something very onerous. It's not, $1 million proposals. It's,
right.
White papers and the such.
So some of the concerns that I hear when I go around the country to speak is about how long it takes to get a contract awarded. What would your response be to that? Why does it take so long? Is it taking too long? We submit a proposal, don't hear back right away.
Right. Yeah. Obviously, where I'm trying to get the system is some things should take a long time. So if we're asking for a proposal for a $10 billion aircraft carrier, we might want to take a little time with that. But we shouldn't need to take as much time for something that's something where it's a piece of innovative technology, something shorter. So where we're really trying to work is how do we speed up and speed line those smaller, really impactful efforts and make them less onerous both on the government and on the industry team. I happen to work for a small business writing proposals before I came in the government, so I understand what it's like to billable hours during the day and bid and proposal on nights and weekends. And so streamlining cost accounting certification is another barrier to entry. So we're trying to look at all those barriers and disincentives, try and reduce that friction, and in that way enable us to more quickly and efficiently partner with small businesses. We're not where we need to get to yet. We still have plenty of work to go there. But as I said, having lived on the other side of the fence there, I understand that can really be a barrier to entry.
One thing for industry to know about large and small is that the Department of Navy every year works with NDIA to put together a conference called the Gold Coast Small Business Procurement Event. And this year it's in San Diego, August 7th and 8th. And it's just a focus on the Navy. Last year we had about 1,500 people come. So hopefully we'll get that many or more this year. The draft agenda is up on the website. So if you just Google Navy Gold Coast, you'll find that the website for that event comes up. We'll also be posting it on Facebook. But during that event, we have opportunities for industry to sign up for matchmaking sessions, which is where they can sit down with a government buyer, a small business person for like 10, 15 minutes and just kind of get pointed in the right direction. So that's another event that's really helpful. Attending industry days and networking, I think, helps you become successful at doing business with the government. Teaming with other companies that have been successful, finding out how they did it. So someone said, I find the long-range acquisition forecast to be service versus product focused. It has not been helpful to identify product capability needs. So that's something that we can take a look at. Are we posting too many of our service contracts on there, not as much product?
Yeah, I think I would agree. It's certainly an area where we want to focus. Again, it goes back to communication. The better we can communicate the areas where we have need and where we have we're looking for ideas, then the more effective we can be. And
it might tie with the budget too. If we don't know what budget we're getting, then we don't know what we're buying, right?
Right. But I think it's an area where if I was sitting on the other side of the fence, I could certainly understand where it's a big Navy and Marine Corps, and understanding where to tie in can be challenging. But I think the good news is, as a service, we value it and we understand that we need to go figure out how to close that communication gap.
Right. Okay. One of the questions is, where would you sign up to receive the broadcasts for capabilities or requests for white papers? FBOgov, and we'll post this on our Facebook site, is where you go to find out about industry days, about calls for white paper, things like that. And we also try as much as we can when we find out about them to put them on our Facebook site too.
And again, part of that is either in your product area or in your geographic area, linking in with those small business liaison officers.
Right.
So again, a phone call or an email or, hey, I'm interested in this. Can you let me know when we might expect the next broad area announcement to come out, broad agency announcement? And again, use them as a resource. The Navy's invested in them as a resource to help drive that connection. Right. We've got awesome people working there. You and your team are doing a bang-up job. Use them as your resource.
Okay, so one question here is, how do small businesses tell the Department of the Navy about small business successes? We definitely want to hear the success stories. Secretary Geurts wants them. We're working on putting together little baseball cards with success stories that he can carry around in his pocket. But that's one way to change culture and create a culture of utilizing small businesses even more as a strategic advantage within the Department of the Navy. So if you send us a good news story, we'll definitely research it, make sure we agree it's a good news story,
sure.
Talk with the customer. But then we want to spread that all across the Department of the Navy, because good news, unfortunately, bad news travels maybe a little faster than good news. We want to get the good news out there and traveling as well, so people know what small businesses are doing to support the Navy.
And I'm always looking for feedback kind of in 3 areas. What's working well, we need to continue. What's working okay, but we could do a lot better. And what's not working at all that we need to get rid of and try something new. And so to agree you've got those feedback stories that you can share with us, that will help us always improve. We're always trying to improve.
So a couple more things, and then we're going to be out of time. One question was, do you have any options for a small business on the East Coast to get involved with the Gold Coast program? Well, we're here today at SBIR Space, and that's another opportunity to meet with Navy personnel. We used to have a small business event on the East Coast, and we called it Blue Coast, and we might look into doing that again. We definitely are trying to get out there as much as we can. Maybe, I don't know the answer to this question, and maybe you do, but how does the Navy decide between going out with an SBIR topic or going with a Rapid Innovation Fund solicitation?
Yeah, without getting into a whole lot of detail, I think we look at, each have their own kind of unique geometries. The Small Business Innovative Research SBIR is a fairly regimented program phase, multiple phases, some limitations and opportunities in each phase, whereas the Innovation Fund has a little more flexibility, and so it really kind of depends on the product, the process, and the scope of work, and where that fits in the phasing of things. So it tends to be the primary driver for it.
And right here during SBIR Space, we just recently had, we're at the same time as SBIR Space, we had the Forum for SBIR STTR Transition, FST, and that's another good event to attend to learn a little bit more about doing business with the Department.
Yeah, and particularly if you're in the technology space, the SBIR program is a wonderfully successful program that allows us, one, at a fairly small scale, you can start out. We'll bring in a lot of companies the first time they work with the governments in an SBIR, and then depending on the success and the needs, that program can grow all the way to a phase 3, which can be a major reward. And many of our now medium and large companies started out at one point as a small business in that space.
Well, thank you very much for coming today.
Thanks for your time. And thank you everybody out there in the small business world. You are part of our national defense. You're as important to our country as all the sailors and Marines out there. And I look forward to working with you in my tenure in this position.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, I think it went well.
Wow. That was